And on the third day, Jesus rose from the grave and ruined my story arc. Hi, Jim McClure here, GM Academy Workshops. Of course, we have a little bit of a different setup now. We're doing things a little bit different. We have a different format, a different location, and we hope this will be a little bit easier to digest. In the past, we've done pretty long, hour-long, dense, what I call buffet-style information, but now we're trying to give you a little bit more snippets, make it a little bit easier to digest for you. So here's the new setup. I hope you enjoy it. Today's topic is on resurrection, or I guess I should rather say anti-resurrection, which is where I stand on this, and specifically the problems that come with bringing players back to life in a campaign, which is a problem, and I want to get that out of here right from the beginning. Resurrection in a campaign is a bad thing. See some of your ears twitching, some of you going, oh, but I use it all the time and it's fine. No, there are major issues with using resurrection, and we are going to break this down here today. So let's jump right into it. The number one issue with using resurrection in a campaign is it removes the threat of death. Death is the single most powerful tool the GM has in his arsenal to balance out power with players. And yes, I'm saying balancing power between the GM and the players, because the players hold more of it. Players and DMs have to work on a certain level together. They have to have a certain association, and one of the number one things that keeps that balance is death. It's the ultimate finale. It's the ultimate thing that can happen to a player that a DM can do, because it is a DM's action when a player dies. By bringing resurrection, you remove that balancing point. You completely remove it from the campaign for the worse. It does nothing but add negatives into it. Adding resurrection removes the threat of death because it's no longer permanent. The reason death is so powerful is because it is end of narrative. Story ended here. And yet, resurrection ends that. It removes that endpoint. It allows it to continue beyond death. And I want to say here, when I'm talking resurrection, I mean every kind of bringing someone back. I mean time travel, I mean alternate dimensions, I mean Phoenix Downs. I say everything that brings a character back into the story is resurrection and should be avoided. The other thing it does besides cheapen death is it cheapens the sacrifice the character made to die. All characters are main characters in that own player's story. So when they die, it's meaningful. They gave a hero's death. They gave a martyr's death. They saved the peasants. They saved their comrade. They did something within their death. And if you bring them back, it cheapens it. It removes that emotional power that comes from final sacrifice, because all it does is make it temporary sacrifice. It cuts it down. It completely and totally undermines it. The third thing it does is it destroys narrative cohesion. This is something I think a lot of people don't really consider when they're making their decisions about resurrection and bringing characters back, but think in your campaign, think in the campaigns that you've played with. I'll give you a second here. How many motivations of NPCs, of villains, of players are based on someone being dead? Quite a few. When you really get to look at it, your quest giver, it's his daughter is the one that died to the orcs, so that's why you're being sent on. Your villain is the big bad villain because his parents were murdered in a brutal accident which set him on down this dark path. All of these things disappear if they could go and revive people. Because resurrection doesn't just work for the PCs, it has to work for the NPCs as well. If there's a way to do it in the world, it means everyone has access to it. And it destroys narrative cohesion once you start breaking down to the individual levels. And your players will. Your players will absolutely dissect your game and go, wait a second, what's the big deal if the queen's daughters died that he wants to go to war with the other kingdom if he can just climb up that mountain too and get the resurrection vial and bring her back? Wouldn't he be doing that? Of course he would. And so many people don't think about that when they add resurrection into their campaign. The other thing I really want you to consider when you're thinking about using resurrection, which I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm kind of strongly against that, is you never see anyone else do it in stories. Good stories. the story known for death right now. Of course, Game of Thrones. And I will say this, I have not read the books. I only know as far as the HBO series and what it's presented. And at this point in the story, no one has come back to life. Why? Because it would destroy everything that it meant for that character to die if they could come back. Not only that, it would destroy what every other death had meant because other people could come back to life. It would remove all of that. Another great example, one of the biggest movies of all time, Lion King. We all love Mufasa, right? And Mufasa died. How much less would that movie have meant if after the big fight between Simba and Scar, Mufasa just walked back up and said, Rashiki did his little chant with his stick, and I'm back alive, yay, and the children cheer. No, it would have destroyed everything that the movie meant up into that point. It's a bad thing to do. But the question comes down to, why do we want to do resurrection? And that's the next thing we're going to answer. People get attached. Players get attached to their PCs. GMs get attached to their NPCs or villains and sometimes want to do it for that reason as well. But that attachment and wanting to bring it back in and of itself is flawed. You will never get what it was before. And at the end of this video, I'll give you the secret to the whole thing and why you should not be worried about it. But just keep that in your back of mind. That's the reason why, and that logic in and of itself is flawed. Now, the other big thing that I hear from people when I talk about resurrection is they go, but Jim, when I have one of my players die, what I can do is I can make it a big event into the story. I can make it a big quest that they have to go and climb to the top of the mountain and fight through the armies and get the vial of revival and bring their player character back. And I hear you, and I go, I want to give you a warning. Making resurrection hard is worse than making it easy. That's right. It is a worse option. And I'll tell you why. Because all of the things that we already discussed, removing the threat of character death, nullifying the sacrifice, destroying narrative cohesion, all of that still exists. And all of it still exists in spades. Making it difficult doesn't actually reduce any of that. People, villains, and NPCs do difficult things all the time. And that doesn't change anything. But it does add other problems to the equation. It adds new problems to the equation. First being, you're taking away from your main storyline. And you should have a main storyline, topic for another day. But you're removing from that to say, we're going to go on a 3 or 4 session escapade to go bring back our friend that died. And we are leaving our narrative, 8 kinds of fun narrative, you know I'm focused on that. And it goes on. And we lose all momentum and all pacing that we had for it. But it does other things worse than that. What is that player going to do while his character is dead for 3 to 4 play sessions? He's going to be playing a new character, isn't he? And he's going to be attached to that character, and he's going to be getting more and more attached with every play session to it. Then what are you going to do with that character when his old character comes back? He's going to have a choice to make. You're going to let him run 2 characters? You're going to kill off one of his other characters? You're going to have a choice to make. He's already embedding himself into a new character, and you're going to cause him to change not only his dynamic, but the group dynamic again when the character comes back. That's problem number 2. Problem number 3, and this is the doozy. You as a GM are setting yourself up for failure, because I want to give you a situation. Player 1 has his character killed. It's a sad, touching event. And you all, the entire group, they find out that there's the resurrection vial at top of Mount whatever, and they scale the top of Mount whatever, and they defeat villain B, and they get the resurrection vial and bring him back to life. And it's a big event, and everyone cheers, and now we're ready to get back to the story. And then we march down the hill, and when we get to the bottom of the hill, player 2 is killed. Now you've got a choice to make. Are you going to once again derail your entire campaign for 3 or 4 play sessions to go climb Mount 2nd whatever and get the 2nd resurrection vial and defeat villain C? Or are you going to tell player 2, we did all this for player 1, we're not doing it for you, because it would be too distracting to the story? Neither option sounds very good, does it? Because neither option is very good. You have set the precedent that we did this for this player. We either have to tell other players we're not going to do that for them, which is unfair, and believe me, they will take it as unfair, or you have to continue to do it, and every time a player dies, get sidetracked with a big quest. You have set yourself up for failure as a GM. You have massive issues because no matter what, someone's going to be unhappy. So this gets to, Jim, what is the secret to this whole resurrection thing? The secret to it, aside from the obvious, is not doing it. It's understanding why you want to do it, and in that understanding is the realization that you have no need to do it. The reason people want to bring their characters back is because they love their characters. They're attached to their characters, they're passionate about their characters, and they're having fun with those characters within the group and within the world the DM has created. Here's the secret. If they are having fun and have developed a character that's working on all levels, and the dynamic between PC and GM is working perfectly to create this attached character, then everything is right for the next character. It's not the character that made this connection work. It is the dynamic between the GM, the players, and the world he's created that's working. And if it's working, no matter what character they bring in next, is going to work as well. That is the big secret. Resurrection isn't necessary because whatever character they make is going to work because the original one worked. It's not the characters that they make, it's the dynamic between players, GM, and world that makes characters interesting. They might not realize it at first, but after a little bit of playtime, they will realize it. So, the last thing I want to get into is, and just briefly because we're not going to get into it actually, is when is the appropriate time for character death, if there's this whole big resurrection question. Well, that's going to be next week's episode. So, join me right back here, GM Academy. We have our weekly workshops are back. Here's our new format. Here's our new location. I've given you all the secret knowledge. I'll see you next week.